Most people lose their lives emotionally before they ever lose them physically. They react too fast. They panic too easily. They let pressure control their decisions. Toxic people control their emotions, and temporary problems control their mindset. But calm people are different. Calm people win wars before they begin. They think while others panic. They stay focused while others collapse. In this audiobook, you will train your mind to stay calm in every situation, under stress, under pressure, under attack, because the person who controls their emotions controls their life. Chapter 1. Stop reacting to everything. Most people are emotionally controlled by things that do not matter. A comment online ruins their mood. A delayed text message destroys their focus. One insult controls their entire day. One inconvenience changes their attitude. That is weakness. And the dangerous part is this: most people do not even realize they are living reactively. They think reacting is normal. They think emotional explosions are honesty. They think anger is strength. They think constantly defending themselves proves confidence. It does not. Reaction is surrender. The moment somebody can control your emotions, they can control your focus. They can control your decisions. They can control your peace. That is why calm people are dangerous. Calm people think before they move. Calm people pause before they speak. Calm people understand one powerful truth: not everything deserves your energy. That is the key. Look at social media. One stranger leaves a negative comment, and somebody spends the next 3 hours angry, typing paragraphs, defending themselves to people they will never meet. Their emotions are now owned by strangers. That is what emotional weakness looks like. A calm mind does not rush to respond. A disciplined person understands that attention is valuable, energy is valuable, focus is valuable, and not everything deserves access to it. You have a choice. Every single day, life will hand you opportunities to react emotionally. Traffic, delays, disrespect, criticism, rejection, rude people, toxic coworkers, manipulative partners. The average person reacts immediately. But you do not have to live that way anymore. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Remember that sentence. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Anybody can react emotionally. Anybody can yell. Anybody can lose control. Anybody can send the angry text. Anybody can slam the door. Anybody can insult someone back. Real strength is restraint. Real strength is control. Imagine a person insulting you in public. Most people instantly become emotional because their ego feels attacked. They raise their voice. They try to win the moment emotionally. But calm people understand something deeper. When you react emotionally, you lose leverage. Now the other person controls the situation. Now they know how to trigger you. Now they understand your weaknesses. Emotional people are predictable. That is why manipulators love emotional people. Toxic people survive on reactions. Narcissists survive on reactions. Attention seekers survive on reactions. They throw emotional bait into the world and wait for weak minds to grab it. Do not become predictable. Not everything deserves your energy. At work, somebody criticizes your idea in a meeting. Most people spend the entire day replaying the moment in their head. Their productivity disappears. Their peace disappears. Their emotional state becomes controlled by another person's opinion. But emotionally disciplined people pause. They listen. They observe. They stay calm. Because they understand something most people never learn. An emotional reaction often creates more damage than the original problem. That is why silence is power. Silence gives you time to think. Silence gives you emotional distance. Silence protects you from making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. You have a choice. You can react emotionally, or you can respond intelligently. That is the difference between weak minds and trained minds. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. In relationships, this lesson becomes even more important. One misunderstanding becomes a massive argument because two emotional people refuse to pause. One person raises their voice. The other person reacts emotionally. Then pride enters the room. Ego enters the room. Now nobody is listening, everybody is reacting. And suddenly, a small problem becomes destruction, all because nobody stopped to control themselves. Calm people understand that emotional escalation solves nothing. You do not need to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not need their permission to stay calm. You do not need to prove your intelligence in every conversation. You do not need the last word. That is maturity, and maturity is emotional discipline. Many people believe emotional control means suppressing emotions. That is not true. Calmness is not emotional numbness. Calmness means you feel emotions without obeying them blindly. That is power. You feel anger, but you control your actions. You feel frustration, but you protect your focus. You feel disappointment, but you keep moving forward. It is not about avoiding emotion. It is about mastering discipline. That is the key. Think about the strongest people you know. The people who handle pressure well. The people who stay composed during chaos. It is not intelligence alone. It is not talent alone. It is emotional stability. While everyone else panics, they think. While everyone else reacts, they observe. While everyone else loses control, they remain grounded. That is why they succeed. A calm mind sees solutions. An emotional mind sees threats everywhere. This is why emotional control changes your entire life. Without it, people manipulate you easily. Without it, stress controls your behavior. Without it, every inconvenience steals your peace. But with emotional discipline, everything changes. Now, criticism no longer destroys you. Now, delays no longer frustrate you. Now, toxic people no longer control your emotions. Because you finally understand, not everything deserves your energy. Practice this daily. The next time somebody insults you, pause. The next time somebody tries to provoke you, pause. The next time life frustrates you, pause. That pause is where your power lives. Most people never pause. They live entirely through emotional impulse. They become slaves to temporary feelings. Do not become one of them. Train yourself to breathe before responding. Train yourself to observe before speaking. Train yourself to detach before reacting. That is mental strength. And understand this clearly, emotional people are exhausting. They destroy opportunities, relationships, and peace because they cannot control themselves. Do not let that become your identity. Become the person who stays calm under pressure. Become the person who thinks clearly during conflict. Become the person who cannot be emotionally controlled by every opinion and inconvenience. Because calmness is not weakness. Calmness is self-mastery. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. The people who control themselves control their future. And before you can master pressure, before you can master conflict, before you can master life itself, you must first master your reactions. You stopped reacting to everything. Now, it is time to learn what pressure truly reveals about the human mind. Chapter 2. Control your mind before pressure controls you. Pressure does not create weakness. Pressure reveals it. That is the truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Anybody can appear calm when life is easy. Anybody can sound confident when nothing is at risk. Anybody can talk about discipline when they are comfortable. But pressure changes everything. Pressure exposes your habits. Pressure exposes your emotional control. Pressure exposes the truth about your mind. And when pressure arrives, most people collapse internally before anything external even happens. That is why this chapter matters. Because if you cannot control your mind under pressure, pressure will control your life. You have a choice. Every stressful situation, either you stay grounded and think clearly, or you allow fear and emotion to take control. Most people choose emotion automatically. A deadline appears. They panic. A financial problem happens. They overthink. A relationship becomes unstable. They emotionally spiral. One unexpected obstacle enters their life, and suddenly their mind becomes chaos. But chaos is not the problem. An untrained mind is the problem. That is the key. Look at elite athletes. During the final seconds of a championship game, millions of people are watching. Pressure is everywhere. One mistake could destroy years of work, yet the greatest athletes stay calm. Why? Because they trained for pressure long before pressure arrived. That is the difference. Weak minds hope pressure never comes. Strong minds prepare for it daily. The soldier trains in peace so they can function during war. The firefighter trains before entering the fire. The pilot trains before the emergency happens. But most people wait until life becomes difficult before trying to build emotional strength. That is backwards. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to your training. Remember that sentence. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to your training. When pressure arrives, your habits take over. Your mindset takes over. Your emotional discipline takes over. If your normal state is panic, pressure will magnify it. If your normal state is emotional impulsiveness, pressure will expose it instantly. That is why emotional control must become a daily practice. Not occasionally, not when convenient. Daily, most people underestimate how destructive panic really is. Panic destroys decision making. A calm mind analyzes. A panicked mind assumes. A calm mind searches for solutions. A panicked mind imagines disaster. A calm mind slows down. A panicked mind speeds up emotionally. And fast emotional decisions often create permanent damage. Think about how many people ruin opportunities because they panic under pressure. They quit too early. They lash out emotionally. They say things they regret. They sabotage relationships. They abandon discipline. Not because the situation was impossible, because pressure exposed an undisciplined mind. That is why calmness becomes a competitive advantage. In business, the calm person leads. In emergencies, the calm person survives. In conflict, the calm person controls the room, because emotional stability creates clarity, and clarity creates power. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. You cannot always control what happens around you, but you can control how you respond to it. That is where mental toughness begins. Most stress is intensified by imagination. People suffer mentally over things that have not even happened yet. They create future disasters in their head. They replay worst-case scenarios repeatedly until fear becomes their emotional reality. That is not intelligence. That is uncontrolled thinking. You must train yourself to separate facts from emotional fiction. Ask yourself, what is actually happening right now? What can I control right now? What action matters right now? That simple shift changes everything. Pressure wants your mind to race emotionally. Discipline slows the mind down. That is the key. Breathe slower. Speak slower. Not. There is a massive difference. When pressure hits, your breathing changes first. Your heart speeds up. Your thoughts accelerate. Your emotions begin demanding immediate action. But calm people interrupt the cycle. They breathe deeply. They pause intentionally. They observe before reacting. That pause protects them from emotional mistakes. And emotional mistakes are expensive. One emotional decision can destroy a career. One emotional outburst can destroy trust. One emotional reaction can destroy years of progress. This is why self-control matters more than talent. Talent without control becomes self-destruction. Look at how many gifted people ruin their lives because they cannot manage pressure. Athletes lose careers. Leaders destroy reputations. Intelligent people sabotage opportunities. Not because they lacked skill, because they lacked emotional discipline. It is not about talent, it is about control. That is the lesson. Pressure also reveals what you truly depend on emotionally. Some people need constant reassurance. Some people need certainty. Some people need validation. Some people need comfort. And the moment those things disappear, they mentally collapse. But mentally strong people build internal stability. They do not depend on perfect conditions to stay focused. That is power. Anybody can stay positive when life feels safe. The real test is staying grounded when life becomes uncertain. And uncertainty is unavoidable. Life will test you. Unexpected problems will come. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Stress will appear without warning. That is part of life, but suffering increases when your mind refuses to stay disciplined during difficult moments. You have a choice. You can feed fear, or you can train calmness. Every moment of pressure is an opportunity to strengthen your mind. The next time stress appears, do not immediately react emotionally. Observe yourself. Notice your breathing. Notice your thoughts. Notice your emotional impulse. Then slow everything down, because calmness is a trained response. Not a personality trait, not luck, training. This is why routines matter. Sleep matters. Exercise matters. Discipline matters. A chaotic lifestyle creates a chaotic mind. People who constantly overstimulate themselves emotionally become fragile under pressure. Endless scrolling, constant drama, constant noise, constant emotional consumption. Then real pressure arrives, and their nervous system collapses because it was never trained for stillness. Silence strengthens the mind. Stillness strengthens the mind. Discipline strengthens the mind. That is why calm people often appear powerful without saying much. Their strength is internal, and internal strength cannot be faked under pressure. Remember this clearly: pressure is not your enemy. Pressure is your teacher. It reveals where you are emotionally weak, so you can strengthen yourself intentionally. That is growth. Every difficult moment is training. Every stressful situation is practice. Every moment where you choose calmness over panic rewires your mind towards strength. One decision at a time. One breath at a time. One response at a time. That is how emotional mastery is built. Slowly, repeatedly, deliberately. Most people spend their lives controlled by pressure because they never train themselves to pause under stress. Do not live that way anymore. Train yourself now, because the calmer you become, the clearer you think. The clearer you think, the stronger you become. And the stronger you become, the less the world can control you emotionally. You mastered your reactions. Now, you must understand the hidden advantage calmness gives you over emotional people everywhere around you. Chapter 3. The calm person has the advantage. The calm person always has the advantage. Always. Not because they are louder, not because they are more aggressive, not because they dominate every conversation. They have the advantage because they control themselves while everyone else is being controlled by emotion. That is real power. Most people think power. They think strength means yelling louder, reacting faster, proving yourself constantly, and dominating every situation emotionally. But emotionally reactive people are easy to control, easy to predict, easy to manipulate, easy to distract. Because once someone controls your emotions, they control your behavior. That is why calmness is dangerous. Calmness interrupts manipulation. A calm person cannot easily be baited. A calm person cannot easily be intimidated. A calm person cannot easily be emotionally destabilized. And in a world filled with emotional chaos, that becomes a massive advantage. Calm is a weapon. Remember that phrase, calm is a weapon. Think about arguments. Two people are in conflict. One person becomes emotional immediately. Their voice rises. Their breathing changes. Their thoughts become scattered. They interrupt constantly because emotion is now controlling them. The other person stays calm, who controls the situation. The calm person, always, because emotional people lose clarity, and when clarity disappears, mistakes begin. That is why leaders, negotiators, athletes, military commanders, and high performers all train emotional control relentlessly. Pressure rewards calmness. The calm person sees what emotional people miss. While everyone else is reacting, the calm person is observing. While everyone else is panicking, the calm person is thinking. While everyone else is desperate for control, the calm person already has it internally. That is the difference. You have a choice. You can become emotionally available to every situation around you, or you can become emotionally disciplined enough to remain grounded no matter what happens. Most people never learn this lesson because they confuse emotional intensity with strength. But emotional intensity is often insecurity in disguise. People yell because they feel unheard. People overreact because they feel powerless. People become defensive because their ego feels threatened. True confidence does not need constant emotional expression. True confidence stays composed. That is the key. Look at the most respected people in any room. Usually they are not the loudest. They are not desperate for attention. They are not emotionally unstable. They are controlled. Their emotions move with discipline. Their words move with intention. Their actions move with clarity. That calmness creates presence, and presence creates influence. Emotional people often talk too much because silence makes them uncomfortable. They explain themselves constantly. They defend every decision. They seek validation through endless emotional expression. But calm people understand something powerful. Silence creates leverage. The less emotionally reactive you become, the more mentally powerful you appear. That does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means becoming disciplined enough to choose your responses carefully. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. Imagine a toxic coworker trying to provoke you. They make passive-aggressive comments. They want an emotional reaction. They want visible frustration. Why? Because emotional reactions give people power over you. But when you remain calm, their strategy fails. Now they become frustrated. Now they lose emotional control. Now they expose themselves. Calmness flips the power dynamic completely. That is why emotional restraint intimidates manipulative people. Manipulators survive on emotional access. If they cannot control your emotions, they lose influence over your mind. That is real freedom. Calm is a weapon. And this applies everywhere. In relationships, in business, in conflict, in leadership, in daily life. The person who controls themselves controls the direction. Most people are too emotionally impulsive to understand this. They react instantly because they are addicted to emotional release. Anger gives them temporary satisfaction. Defensiveness gives them temporary protection. Arguing gives them temporary ego relief, but temporary emotional relief often creates permanent consequences. One emotional outburst can destroy trust. One emotional reaction can ruin opportunities. One emotional decision can damage years of progress. That is why discipline matters more than emotion. It is not about feelings. It is about control. The calm person understands timing. Not every battle deserves engagement. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves emotional attention. Not everything deserves your energy. That phrase will protect your peace if you truly understand it, because emotional people waste enormous amounts of mental energy on meaningless situations. They argue online with strangers. They obsess over criticism. They replay disrespect repeatedly in their minds. They emotionally chase closure from people who never intended to give it, and slowly, their emotional energy disappears. Meanwhile, disciplined people stay focused. They protect their mind. They protect their peace. They protect their attention. Because they understand attention is one of the most valuable things they possess. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy goes, life follows. That is why emotional discipline changes everything. When you stop reacting emotionally to every situation. Your focus sharpens immediately. You think more clearly. You sleep more peacefully. You make better decisions. You become harder to manipulate, and people notice it. Calmness creates respect, not forced respect, because emotional stability is rare. Most people are controlled by mood, stress, insecurity, and outside opinions. They are emotionally pulled in different directions every single day. But calm people stay centered. That emotional stability creates trust. Think about emergency situations. When chaos happens, nobody looks toward the loudest emotional person for leadership. People naturally search for the calmest person in the room. Why? Because calmness signals control. A calm mind feels safe. A calm mind feels capable. A calm mind feels capable. A calm mind feels prepared. That is why emotional mastery is one of the most valuable skills you will ever build. And understand this clearly. Calmness is not passiveness. Calmness is controlled strength. There is a difference. Weak people react emotionally because they cannot control themselves. Strong people stay composed because they can. That is power. You do not need to dominate every conversation. You do not need to prove yourself constantly. You do not need to emotionally defend your worth to everyone around you. You have a choice. You can waste your energy reacting emotionally to every challenge life throws at you, or you can become mentally disciplined enough to stay calm while others lose control. That decision changes your entire future, because calm people think long-term. Emotional people react short-term. Calm people build. Emotional people sabotage. Calm people remain focused. Emotional people become distracted by every temporary feeling. And over time, that difference becomes enormous. The disciplined mind accumulates power quietly. That is why calmness often looks invisible in the beginning. People underestimate quiet discipline because it is not dramatic. It does not seek attention. It does not perform emotionally. But over time, calm people separate themselves from emotionally reactive people completely, because while others waste years trapped in drama, conflict, insecurity, and emotional chaos, calm people stay focused on growth. That is the hidden advantage. Inner control creates external success. And the stronger your emotional discipline becomes, the less toxic people can influence your mind. Which brings us to the next lesson. Because staying calm is not enough if you continue giving toxic people emotional access to your life. Chapter 4. Stop giving toxic people access to your mind. Some people are not trying to build with you. They are trying to drain you. Drain your peace. Drain your focus. Drain your confidence. Drain your emotional energy. And the moment you fail to recognize that, your mind becomes a battlefield, controlled by other people. That is why emotional boundaries matter, because not everyone deserves access to your mind. Protect your peace like your life depends on it. Remember that phrase. Protect your peace like your life depends on it. Most people are emotionally exhausted, not because life is impossible, but because they constantly allow toxic people into their mental space. Negative conversations, constant criticism, manipulation, drama, jealousy, emotional games, day after day. And eventually, they wonder why they feel mentally heavy all the time. Energy matters. The people around you shape your emotional state more than you realize. That is why mentally disciplined people become extremely careful about who they allow close to them. You have a choice. You can continue giving toxic people unlimited emotional access to your life, or you can finally protect your peace with discipline. Most toxic people survive on reactions. That is the key. They provoke. They criticize. They guilt trip. They manipulate. They create chaos. And then they wait for emotional responses. Why? Because emotional reactions give them control. The moment they can disturb your peace, they gain influence over your mind. That is why manipulators study your emotions carefully. They watch what triggers you. They observe your insecurities. They learn what makes you angry, defensive, guilty, or emotionally unstable, and then they use it repeatedly. Emotional people become predictable targets. That is why calmness becomes protection. Calm people are difficult to manipulate because calm people pause before reacting. They observe behavior instead of instantly becoming emotionally consumed by it. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. Think about narcissistic people. They thrive on emotional control. They want attention constantly. They want emotional reactions constantly. They create conflict because chaos keeps them emotionally relevant in your life. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, their power weakens. That is why toxic people often become angry when you become calm. Your emotional discipline threatens their control. Protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. Look at social media. Millions of people wake up every day and immediately consume negativity. Arguments, outrage, comparison, drama, judgment, endless emotional stimulation. And then they wonder why their mind feels restless. You cannot consume chaos constantly and expect inner peace. That is impossible. Your environment trains your emotions. If you surround yourself with emotional instability, gossip, negativity, and drama, your nervous system slowly adapts to chaos. Then calmness starts feeling unfamiliar. That is dangerous, because eventually some people become addicted to emotional turbulence. Silence feels uncomfortable to them. Stability feels boring. Peace feels unnatural. So they unconsciously recreate chaos everywhere they go. In relationships, in friendships, at work, online, everywhere. Do not become one of those people. It is not about drama. It is about discipline. That is the difference. Mentally strong people understand that protecting peace sometimes requires distance. Distance from manipulators. Distance from constant negativity. Distance from emotionally draining environments. Distance from people who only contact you when they need emotional control over you. You do not owe everyone unlimited access to your energy. That lesson will save your life emotionally. Many people stay trapped in toxic cycles because they fear disappointing others. They fear being misunderstood. They fear setting boundaries, so they tolerate disrespect repeatedly. But every time you tolerate emotional chaos without boundaries, you teach people how to treat you. That is the truth. Boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are self-respect, and self-respect creates emotional stability. You do not need their permission to protect your peace. You do not need their approval to create distance. You do not need to explain every boundary you establish. That is maturity. Weak people feel guilty for protecting themselves. Strong people understand it is necessary. Because if you allow toxic people unlimited emotional access, eventually your focus disappears completely. And focus is your life force. Think about how much energy people waste obsessing over toxic individuals, replaying conversations, analyzing texts, thinking about betrayal, imagining arguments, seeking closure from people who never intended to give peace in the first place. That emotional obsession becomes mental imprisonment. Meanwhile, calm people move differently. They accept reality quickly. They detach strategically. They protect their attention fiercely because they understand one important truth: attention is expensive. Where your attention goes, your emotional energy follows. That is why disciplined people stop feeding negativity mentally. They stop rehearsing pain repeatedly inside their mind. They stop emotionally chasing people who constantly create instability. Not because they are cold, because they value peace. Protect your peace like your life depends on it. At work, there will always be negative people. People who gossip constantly, people who criticize constantly. Do not absorb their mindset. Negativity spreads emotionally. One bitter person can poison an entire environment if you are mentally undisciplined enough to absorb their emotional state. That is why emotional separation matters. You can work around negativity without becoming negative internally. You can acknowledge toxic behavior without emotionally attaching yourself to it. That is power. Most people think emotional strength means fighting every battle directly. Wrong. Sometimes emotional strength means refusing to engage at all. Silence is powerful. Not every insult requires defense. Not every accusation requires explanation. Not every manipulative tactic deserves emotional participation. Sometimes the strongest response is emotional detachment. That frustrates manipulative people because they lose access to your reactions. And reactions are what they crave. Remember this clearly. Some people become uncomfortable when they can no longer control you emotionally. That discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is protecting your mind. Your responsibility is protecting your focus. Your responsibility is protecting your emotional stability, because without emotional stability, everything else becomes harder. Your goals become harder. Your discipline becomes harder. Your peace becomes harder. Your peace becomes harder. That is why your environment matters so much. Pay attention to how people affect your nervous system. Do you feel drained after speaking to them? Do you feel anxious around them? Do you constantly feel emotionally exhausted after interactions? Your body notices danger before your mind fully admits it. Listen carefully. Not every connection is healthy. Not every relationship deserves permanence. Not every person deserves continued emotional access to you. That is not bitterness. That is wisdom. You have a choice. You can spend your life emotionally reacting to toxic people, or you can become mentally disciplined enough to detach, protect your peace, and move forward without emotional chaos controlling your mind. That decision changes everything. Because calmness is impossible without boundaries, and emotional freedom becomes impossible when toxic people control your attention constantly. Protect your peace like your life depends on it, because the quality of your life is directly connected to the quality of your mind. And the stronger your emotional boundaries become, the harder it becomes for the outside world to destabilize you internally. Now, it is time to go deeper, because emotional control is not built in one moment of calmness. It is built through repetition, pressure, and training. Chapter 5. Train yourself to stay unshaken. Mental strength is not built during easy moments. It is built during resistance, during discomfort, during pressure, during uncertainty, during moments where your emotions beg you to quit, panic, complain, or escape. That is where emotional discipline is created. Most people want calmness without training for it. They want confidence without discomfort. They want peace without discipline. They want emotional control without changing their habits. But the mind does not become strong accidentally. It becomes strong through repetition. You must train yourself to stay unshaken. That is the key. When life becomes difficult, untrained people collapse emotionally because they spent their entire lives avoiding discomfort. Every inconvenience frustrates them. Every obstacle discourages them. Every stressful moment overwhelms them. Why? Because comfort weakened them. Comfort creates emotional fragility when it becomes an addiction, and modern life makes emotional weakness easy. People avoid silence. People avoid boredom. People avoid difficulty. People avoid patience. The moment discomfort appears, they distract themselves immediately. Phone, entertainment, scrolling, complaining, escaping. Anything to avoid sitting with discomfort. But emotionally strong people do the opposite. They train themselves to endure discomfort without emotionally breaking. That is why discipline creates power. You have a choice. You can spend your life running from discomfort, or you can train yourself to become stronger than it. Most people misunderstand mental toughness completely. They think toughness means aggression. They think toughness means pretending nothing affects you. Wrong. Mental toughness means remaining steady under pressure. It means feeling stress without surrendering to it. It means feeling fear without obeying it. It means staying disciplined even when emotions demand comfort. That is real strength. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to your training. Remember that. A person who never trains emotional control will panic under pressure automatically. A person who constantly reacts emotionally during small problems will react emotionally during major problems too, because habits repeat under stress. That is why your daily behavior matters. Every small act of discipline strengthens your emotional foundation. Waking up on time when you do not feel like it, exercising when your mind wants comfort, remaining calm during inconvenience, practicing patience during frustration. These moments seem small, but they are training your nervous system. Every disciplined action teaches your mind one powerful lesson. I can stay in control even when emotions push against me. That is how mental resilience is built, slowly, repeatedly. Look at military training. Soldiers are deliberately placed under stress repeatedly. Exhaustion, pressure, chaos, uncertainty. Why? Because the purpose is not comfort. The purpose is conditioning. The human mind adapts to what it repeatedly experiences. If you constantly train panic, distraction, and emotional impulsiveness, your mind becomes weak under pressure. But if you train calmness, discipline, and emotional control consistently, your mind becomes harder to shake. That is the key. Your habits are programming your emotional responses every single day. Most people wait until life becomes difficult before trying to develop emotional control. But emotional strength must be built before the crisis arrives, not during it. Think about athletes. The athlete who stays calm during competition is usually the athlete who trained harder than everyone else behind the scenes. Repetition created certainty. Uncertainty creates calmness. People panic when they feel mentally unprepared. That is why preparation reduces emotional chaos. The more disciplined your life becomes, the less emotionally unstable you become. Because discipline creates internal order, and internal order creates peace. It is not about motivation, it is about training. Motivation disappears constantly, discipline stays. That is why disciplined people appear emotionally stable, even during difficult seasons of life. Their routines anchor them mentally. While emotional people depend on mood, disciplined people depend on structure. That difference changes everything. A weak mind says, "I do not feel like it." A disciplined mind says, "Do it anyway." That sentence alone can transform your entire future. Because emotional people make decisions based on temporary feelings. Disciplined people make decisions based on long-term identity. And identity shapes destiny. You must stop asking yourself how you feel constantly. Ask yourself instead, what kind of person am I training myself to become? That question creates accountability, because every action reinforces identity. Every time you remain calm under pressure, you reinforce emotional control. Every time you resist emotional impulsiveness. Every time you choose focus over chaos, you strengthen your mind. That is how mentally unshaken people are created, not overnight, through repetition. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. This also means you must stop overprotecting yourself emotionally. Many people avoid every uncomfortable situation possible. They avoid hard conversations. They avoid challenges. They avoid rejection. They avoid responsibility. And slowly, avoidance weakens them mentally. Avoidance feels safe temporarily, but long-term avoidance creates emotional fragility. The strongest minds are built through controlled exposure to discomfort. You build courage by facing fear repeatedly. You build patience by enduring frustration repeatedly. You build calmness by practicing calmness repeatedly. That is why emotionally disciplined people often appear different from everyone else around them. They are less reactive, less desperate, less emotionally chaotic, because they train themselves not to collapse every time life becomes uncomfortable. You can train this too. Start small. Delay gratification intentionally. Sit in silence without distraction. Control your breathing during stress. Pause before responding emotionally. Finish difficult tasks without complaining. These behaviors seem simple, but they strengthen your emotional endurance daily. Most people underestimate the power of emotional endurance. The ability to remain steady during difficult moments is one of the rarest skills in the modern world. People break too quickly now. One criticism destroys confidence. One setback destroys momentum. One rejection destroys self-belief. That is emotional fragility, and emotional fragility creates suffering. Because life will never stop testing you. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be pressure. There will always be discomfort. The question is not whether difficult moments will come. The question is whether your mind will be prepared when they arrive. That preparation begins now, not tomorrow. Now, train yourself to stay calm during inconvenience. Train yourself to stay focused during pressure. Train yourself to stay disciplined when emotions demand escape. Because emotional mastery is not built during rare dramatic moments. It is built during ordinary moments repeated consistently. That is why mentally strong people are not magical. They are trained. And once you truly understand that, everything changes. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stopped depending on perfect motivation. You stop letting emotions control your consistency. Instead, you build yourself deliberately, one disciplined action at a time. You have a choice. You can continue living emotionally reactive, emotionally fragile, and emotionally dependent on comfort. Or you can train yourself to become steady, focused, and mentally unshaken, no matter what life throws at you. That decision determines your future, because calmness is not natural for most people. It is earned through repetition, through discomfort, through discipline. And once you become emotionally unshaken internally, you no longer need constant attention, validation, or noise from the outside world. Which brings us to the next lesson, because true power often grows in silence. Chapter 6. Silence builds power. Weak people talk too much. They announce every plan. They explain every decision. They defend themselves constantly. They argue with strangers. They seek validation through noise, and in the process, they leak their energy everywhere. Strong people move differently. Strong people understand that silence protects focus. Remember that phrase. Silence protects focus. Most people are uncomfortable with silence because silence forces them to face themselves. Silence removes distraction. Silence exposes insecurity. Silence reveals whether your confidence is internal or dependent on outside attention. That is why so many people constantly need noise. Noise from social media, noise from opinions, noise from drama, noise from endless talking. But noise weakens clarity, and clarity is power. You have a choice. You can spend your life explaining yourself to people who do not truly care. Or you can quietly build a life that speaks for itself. That is the key. Look at insecure people carefully. They constantly need others to know what they are doing. Every goal becomes an announcement. Every small achievement becomes a performance. Every opinion becomes a debate. Why? Because attention temporarily feeds insecurity. But temporary attention is not confidence. Real confidence is quiet. Real confidence does not need constant recognition to survive. That is why disciplined people often appear calm, focused, and emotionally stable. Their identity is not dependent on outside applause. They do not need permission. They do not need constant approval. They do not need validation from everyone around them. They trust themselves, and self-trust creates silence. Many people destroy their momentum because they talk too much about what they plan to do instead of doing the work privately. They announce the business before building it. They announce the transformation before earning it. They announce the discipline before practicing it consistently. And psychologically, talking creates the illusion of progress. But illusion is not transformation. Action is transformation. Silence protects focus. The less you talk about your goals, the more energy you preserve for execution. That is why some of the most successful people move quietly. They understand that energy spent talking is energy not spent building. Weak minds crave attention. That difference changes everything. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. This applies emotionally too. When somebody insults you, your ego wants to respond immediately. Your ego wants to defend itself. Your ego wants emotional satisfaction. But disciplined people pause, not because they are weak, because they are controlled. They understand that silence often creates more power than emotional reaction. Think about arguments. The person desperately trying to prove themselves emotionally often looks unstable. Meanwhile, the calm person who remains composed naturally controls the emotional atmosphere because emotional restraint signals confidence. People who truly know their value do not need to defend it constantly. That is maturity, and maturity creates peace. Most people waste enormous amounts of emotional energy trying to control how others perceive them. They want everyone to understand them, everyone to approve of them, everyone to agree with them. That is impossible, and chasing universal approval creates emotional exhaustion. You do not need their permission to stay focused. You do not need their understanding to continue growing. You do not need to explain your vision to people committed to misunderstanding you. That is the lesson. Silence protects your energy from unnecessary conflict, and energy is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Every argument drains energy. Every unnecessary explanation drains energy. Every emotional debate drains energy. Meanwhile, disciplined people preserve energy carefully because they understand energy becomes results. That is why emotional discipline and silence are connected deeply. Emotionally reactive people cannot stay silent for long. Their emotions demand expression constantly. They feel compelled to prove themselves, defend themselves, or emotionally discharge frustration immediately. But calm people tolerate silence comfortably. That comfort creates emotional control. Look at powerful leaders, elite athletes, experienced fighters, and mentally disciplined individuals. Under pressure, they rarely become emotionally loud. They become more focused, more precise, more controlled, because they understand something most people never learn. Stillness creates strength. That is the key. Silence also protects you from impulsive mistakes. Many people ruin relationships, careers, and opportunities because they spoke emotionally during temporary moments of anger. One emotional message, one emotional outburst, one emotional reaction, and the damage becomes permanent. That is why silence matters. Silence gives emotions time to settle. Silence creates space for clarity. Silence interrupts emotional impulsiveness. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say nothing at all, not out of fear, out of discipline. There is power in refusing to emotionally participate in chaos, especially in the modern world today. Everybody reacts instantly. Everybody shares opinions instantly. Everybody broadcasts emotions instantly. And because of that, emotional discipline has become rare. Rare qualities become valuable. A person who stays calm while others panic becomes valuable. A person who stays silent while others argue becomes valuable. A person who remains focused while others seek attention becomes dangerous. Because while emotionally reactive people waste years trapped in distraction, disciplined people quietly build strength. That strength compounds over time. Silence also teaches observation. When you stop constantly talking, defending, and reacting emotionally, You begin noticing things more clearly. You notice manipulation faster. You notice insecurity faster. You notice emotional patterns faster. Because calm observation sharpens awareness. Emotional noise weakens awareness. That is why quiet people often understand more than loud people. They observe before speaking. They listen before reacting. They think before moving. That creates wisdom. And wisdom creates emotional stability. Many people fear silence because they associate silence with loneliness. But silence is not loneliness. Silence trains focus. Silence trains emotional independence. Silence trains self-awareness. A person who cannot sit alone quietly for even a short period usually depends heavily on distraction to escape themselves mentally. Do not live that way. Train yourself to become comfortable in stillness. Sit without constant stimulation. Walk without needing noise. Think without needing distraction. Because the more comfortable you become internally, the less desperate you become externally. And desperation destroys peace. Weak people seek attention constantly because attention temporarily fills emotional emptiness. But emotionally disciplined people build fulfillment internally. That is why they move differently. Quiet confidence feels different. Quiet discipline feels different. Quiet focus feels different. It does not need performance. It simply exists. You have a choice. You can continue wasting emotional energy trying to prove yourself constantly. Or you can quietly build strength while others waste themselves emotionally. That decision changes your future completely, because the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The strongest person is usually the one most in control of themselves. And self-control creates silence naturally. Remember this: silence protects focus. Silence protects peace. Silence protects power. The less emotionally reactive you become, the more mentally clear you become. And the more mentally clear you become, the easier it becomes to let go of things outside your control. Which brings us to the next lesson. Because peace truly begins when you stop trying to control everything around you. Chapter 7. Detach from what you cannot control. Most people suffer twice. First, they suffer because life is difficult. Then they suffer again because they refuse to accept reality. They try to control everything, every outcome, every opinion, every person, every situation. And the more they try to control what cannot be controlled, the more anxious, frustrated, and emotionally exhausted they become. That is why detachment is freedom. Control yourself, not the world. Remember that phrase: control yourself, not the world. You cannot control whether people misunderstand you. You cannot control whether people leave you. You cannot control every setback, delay, rejection, or disappointment that life throws at you. But you can control your response. That is where peace begins. Most emotional suffering comes from resistance to reality. People want certainty in an uncertain world. They want guarantees where none exist. They want permanent comfort in a life built on change. And when reality refuses to obey their expectations, they emotionally collapse. But mentally strong people understand something different. Acceptance creates clarity. That is the key. Acceptance does not mean weakness. Acceptance does not mean surrender. Acceptance means seeing reality clearly, instead of emotionally fighting what already exists. Because you cannot solve a problem clearly if your emotions refuse to accept the situation honestly. You have a choice. You can spend your life emotionally resisting reality, or you can train yourself to adapt calmly to whatever life places in front of you. That decision changes everything. Think about rejection. Most people take rejection personally. A failed relationship destroys their self-worth. A lost opportunity destroys their confidence. Someone else's decision becomes emotional proof that they are not enough. But rejection is part of life. And emotionally mature people understand this. Not everyone stays. Not every opportunity succeeds. That is reality. The problem is not rejection itself. The problem is emotional attachment to outcomes. People become emotionally dependent on specific results. They tell themselves, this must happen. This person must stay. This plan must work. And when life moves differently, panic begins. Because attachment creates emotional fragility. Detached people still care. Detached people still work hard. Detached people still love deeply. But they do not emotionally collapse when life becomes unpredictable. That is strength. Control yourself, not the world. Look at how many people destroy their peace, obsessing over things outside their control. They replay conversations endlessly. They analyze other people's behavior constantly. They worry about the future obsessively. They try to force outcomes emotionally. And all of it drains their energy without changing reality. That is why emotional detachment is powerful. Detachment protects focus. The moment you stop trying to emotionally control everything, your mind becomes lighter immediately. Because now your energy returns to the only thing you truly control, yourself. Your mindset, your discipline, your behavior, your actions. That is where your power lives. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. This lesson becomes critical during uncertainty. Uncertainty terrifies emotionally dependent people because they need guarantees to feel safe. They need certainty before acting. They need reassurance before trusting themselves. But life does not offer certainty. Life changes constantly. Careers change. Circumstances change. People change. And if your peace depends on controlling external conditions, your peace will always remain fragile. That is why mentally strong people build internal stability instead. Their peace comes from discipline, not perfect circumstances. That is the difference. Weak minds panic when life changes unexpectedly. Disciplined minds adapt. Adaptation is power. Think about nature. The strongest tree during a storm is not always the stiffest tree. Often, it is the tree flexible enough to bend without breaking. The same is true mentally. Rigid emotional attachment creates suffering. Emotional flexibility creates resilience. That is why calm people recover faster from setbacks. They accept reality faster. They stop wasting emotional energy fighting things they cannot change. Instead, they ask, what can I control now? That question changes your entire mindset. Not, why is this happening to me? Not, how do I force reality to obey me? Instead, what action can I take now? That is emotional maturity. Many people stay trapped emotionally because they confuse control with security. But trying to control everything creates anxiety, not peace. Because deep down, your mind knows complete control is impossible. And the harder you try to force life emotionally, the more frustrated you become. That is why surrendering control over external outcomes often creates freedom internally. Not passive surrender, disciplined surrender. There is a difference. You still work hard, you still prepare, you still pursue goals, but you stop emotionally attaching your identity to outcomes you cannot fully control. That is power. You do not need certainty to remain disciplined. You do not need guarantees to stay calm. You do not need perfect conditions to move forward. That is the mindset shift. Emotionally reactive people wait for certainty before acting. Disciplined people act despite uncertainty, because confidence is not certainty. Confidence is self-trust, and self-trust grows every time you survive difficult moments without emotionally collapsing. That is why struggle can strengthen you if you respond correctly. Every setback teaches detachment. Every disappointment teaches adaptation. Every painful moment teaches emotional endurance, if you allow it. But many people never learn because they remain emotionally attached to how life should look. That attachment blinds them. Life does not care about your expectations. Reality moves according to reality. The faster you accept that, the calmer your mind becomes. Control yourself, not the world. This also applies to people. You cannot force people to understand you. You cannot force loyalty. You cannot force honesty. You cannot force honesty. You cannot force effort. Trying to emotionally control others will exhaust you endlessly. Your responsibility is choosing how much access they receive to your life. That is wisdom. Many people stay emotionally trapped because they keep trying to change toxic people emotionally instead of accepting reality clearly. Acceptance frees you. The moment you stop expecting unhealthy people to suddenly become healthy, your emotional clarity returns. Now, you can make disciplined decisions instead of emotional ones. That changes everything. Detachment also protects you from emotional extremes. When people become overly attached to success, praise, validation, or outcomes, their emotional state becomes unstable. Good results make them feel invincible. Bad results destroy them emotionally. That is dangerous. Calm people stay balanced. They do not let praise control them. They do not let failure destroy them. They remain centered, regardless of temporary outcomes, because they understand life moves in cycles. Nothing stays permanent, not success, not failure, not pain, not comfort. Everything changes, and the more emotionally attached you become to temporary conditions, the more suffering you create internally. You have a choice. You can spend your life emotionally chasing control over things outside your power, or you can detach, adapt, and strengthen yourself internally instead. That decision determines your peace. Because peace does not come from controlling the world. Peace comes from controlling yourself within the world. And once you stop wasting emotional energy trying to control everything externally, you finally have enough energy to master yourself internally. Which brings us to the next lesson. Because emotional strength is impossible without discipline. Chapter 8. Discipline creates emotional strength. Most people are controlled by feelings. If they feel motivated, they work. If they feel confident, they act. If they feel inspired, they stay focused. But the moment those feelings disappear, their discipline disappears too. That is weakness, because feelings change daily, sometimes hourly, and if your behavior depends entirely on emotion, your life will always remain inconsistent. That is why discipline matters more than motivation. Feelings change, discipline stays. Remember that phrase. Feelings change, discipline stays. Emotionally reactive people build their lives around temporary moods. When life feels easy, they feel strong. When life becomes difficult, they collapse mentally. Why? Because they never trained consistency. Consistency creates emotional stability. That is the key. You have a choice. You can continue obeying every temporary emotion that enters your mind. Or you can build standards strong enough to guide your behavior regardless of how you feel. That decision changes your future completely. Discipline is emotional control in action. Every time you wake up early when you do not feel like it, you strengthen your mind. Every time you stay calm during frustration, you strengthen your mind. Every time you complete difficult work instead of chasing comfort, you strengthen your mind. That is how emotional resilience is built. Not through motivational speeches, not through temporary inspiration. Through repeated, disciplined action. Most people wait to feel ready before changing their life. That is why they stay stuck. Disciplined people understand something powerful. Action creates momentum, not emotion. The more consistently you act with discipline, the stronger your emotional state becomes over time. Because discipline creates self-respect, and self-respect creates confidence. Weak minds search for comfort constantly. Comfort in distraction, comfort in excuses, comfort in avoidance. But comfort has a hidden cost. Too much comfort weakens your ability to tolerate pressure. That is why emotionally fragile people struggle with even small inconveniences. Their nervous system became addicted to ease. Then reality challenges them. and they panic. Discipline trains you differently. Discipline teaches you to function even when conditions are imperfect. That is power. Feelings change. Discipline stays. Look at people who constantly chase motivation online. One day, they feel unstoppable. Their emotional state changes constantly because they built their life on emotional intensity instead of structure. Structure creates stability. That is why routines matter so much. Wake up consistently. Train your body consistently. Protect your sleep consistently. Control your environment consistently. Because chaos in your daily life eventually becomes chaos in your mind. Your habits shape your emotional state more than your feelings do. That is the truth most people ignore. A disorganized life creates emotional instability. A disciplined life creates mental clarity. Think about how differently you feel when your environment is controlled versus chaotic. A clean environment feels calmer. A structured schedule feels calmer. Healthy routines feel calmer. Why? Because discipline reduces mental friction. Undisciplined people create unnecessary emotional stress. Constantly, they procrastinate, avoid responsibilities, ignore routines, neglect their health, and then wonder why they feel emotionally overwhelmed. Their habits created the chaos. That is why discipline is freedom, not restriction. Freedom, because disciplined people spend less time emotionally recovering from self-created problems. That is the key. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. There will always be days when you feel tired, days when you feel discouraged, days when you feel emotionally drained. That is normal. But disciplined people do not let temporary emotions decide permanent outcomes. They continue moving. Not perfectly, consistently. That difference changes everything. Weak minds need emotional excitement constantly to stay committed. Strong minds rely on standards. A disciplined person says, "This is who I am," not, "I'll do it when I feel motivated." That mindset creates emotional independence, because now your behavior no longer depends entirely on emotional conditions. You become reliable to yourself. And reliability builds self-trust. Many people secretly lose confidence because deep down they do not trust themselves. They make promises emotionally, then break them repeatedly. I'll start tomorrow. I'll stay focused. I'll stay calm. I'll be consistent. Then emotions change and discipline disappears. Every broken promise weakens self-respect, but every disciplined action strengthens identity. That is why small wins matter. Finishing workouts matters. Keeping routines matters. Following through matters. Because every act of discipline sends a message to your mind. I can trust myself. That internal trust changes your emotional state completely. No pressure affects you less. Now setbacks affect you less. Now criticism affects you less. Because your confidence is no longer built on feelings alone. It is built on evidence. Evidence created through disciplined behavior repeated over time. That is real confidence, not loud performative confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind built privately through consistency. Most people underestimate how emotionally stabilizing discipline truly is. Exercise stabilizes emotions. Sleep stabilizes emotions. Nutrition stabilizes emotions. Structure stabilizes emotions. But modern people often ignore these fundamentals while searching for emotional peace. That is backwards. Mental strength is connected to daily behavior. You cannot live chaotically and expect inner peace consistently. That is impossible. Your environment trains your nervous system constantly. If your life is filled with distraction, overstimulation, poor habits, emotional impulsiveness, and inconsistency, your mind will reflect that chaos. But disciplined habits retrain the mind toward stability. That is why calm people often live structured lives. Not because structure is boring, because structure protects peace. Feelings change, discipline stays, And discipline becomes most important during difficult seasons. Anybody can stay focused during easy periods. Anybody can stay positive when life feels good. But discipline matters when motivation disappears, when life becomes stressful, when emotions become heavy, when progress feels slow. That is where identity is revealed. Weak people stop, disciplined people continue, not because they enjoy suffering, because they understand something important. Temporary discomfort creates long-term strength. That is why emotionally disciplined people tolerate discomfort better than most. They train themselves not to obey every emotional impulse immediately. They can delay gratification. They can endure frustration. They can remain focused despite emotional resistance. That creates power. The modern world trains emotional impulsiveness constantly. Instant entertainment, instant pleasure, instant stimulation, instant distraction. And because of that, patience has become rare. But patience is emotional discipline. The ability to wait calmly, the ability to continue steadily, the ability to trust long-term effort. That separates strong minds from weak ones. You have a choice. You can continue living emotionally, reacting to every mood and temporary feeling, or you can become disciplined enough to remain steady regardless of emotion. That choice determines the quality of your future. Because emotional strength is not built through comfort, it is built through disciplined consistency repeated daily, one controlled decision at a time, one difficult action at a time, an undisciplined habit at a time. That is how mentally strong people are created. And once discipline becomes your identity, emotional chaos loses much of its power over you. Because now you are no longer controlled by feelings alone. You are guided by standards, and standards create stability. But emotional discipline becomes even more important when pressure comes through conflict and confrontation, because anyone can stay calm alone. The real test is staying calm when another person challenges your emotions directly. Chapter 9. Learn to stay calm during conflict. Conflict reveals who people truly are. Not when life is easy. Not when emotions are comfortable. During pressure. During disagreement. During moments where ego, anger, and pride enter the room. That is when emotional discipline is tested. And most people fail that test immediately. One insult changes their tone. One disagreement changes their behavior. One moment of disrespect destroys their composure. Why? Because they never learned how to stay calm during conflict. But calmness during conflict is one of the most powerful skills you will ever develop. The calmer mind controls the room. Remember that phrase. The calmer mind controls the room. Most conflict becomes destructive because emotional people react faster than they think. They interrupt, they assume, they escalate, they speak from emotion instead of clarity. And once emotions take control, communication disappears. Now the goal is no longer understanding. The goal becomes winning emotionally. That is why so many relationships fail. That is why workplaces become toxic. That is why families stay divided for years. Emotion replaced discipline. You have a choice. You can allow conflict to control your emotions, or you can train yourself to remain grounded while others lose control. That decision changes every relationship in your life. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. Conflict triggers survival instincts inside people. The body feels attacked emotionally, so it reacts automatically. Heart rate increases. Breathing changes. Thoughts become aggressive. And because most people lack emotional awareness, they obey those impulses immediately. That is weakness. Strength begins when you stop obeying every emotional impulse automatically. That is the key. Think about arguments carefully. Two people are speaking. One becomes louder emotionally. Their energy becomes unstable. They interrupt constantly because emotion is controlling them. The other person stays calm. Who has the advantage? The calm person, always, because emotional escalation destroys clarity, and clarity controls outcomes. Calm people listen more carefully during conflict. They observe behavior instead of becoming consumed by behavior emotionally. That creates emotional intelligence. Most people do not actually listen during arguments. They simply wait for their turn to react. That is why conflict repeats endlessly. Nobody pauses. Nobody reflects. Nobody controls themselves. Emotion leads the conversation instead of discipline. But disciplined people move differently. They slow themselves down intentionally. They lower their tone. They control their breathing. They pause before responding. Not because they are weak. Because they are weak. Because they understand emotional control creates leverage. Look at experienced negotiators, skilled leaders, elite athletes, and mentally disciplined individuals under pressure. They rarely become emotionally explosive during conflict. Why? Because emotional stability protects decision making. The moment emotions fully take over, intelligence decreases. People say things they regret. People damage trust permanently. People create problems larger than the original conflict itself. One emotional sentence can destroy years of connection. That is why discipline matters. It is not about avoiding conflict completely. It is about managing yourself during conflict. There is a difference. Weak people think emotional aggression equals strength. But aggression often reveals insecurity, fear, or lack of self-control. Truly strong people do not need to dominate emotionally to feel powerful. They remain composed. That composure creates respect. You do not need to win every argument emotionally. You do not need the final word. You do not need to prove your intelligence constantly. You do not need to react to every provocation. That mindset protects peace. Many toxic people intentionally create emotional conflict because conflict gives them attention and control. They provoke reactions deliberately. They push emotional buttons deliberately. Why? Because emotional reactions make you predictable. Once someone knows how to trigger you emotionally, they gain influence over your behavior. That is dangerous. Calmness breaks manipulation. When someone tries to provoke you and you remain emotionally grounded, their strategy weakens immediately. That is power, not loud power. Controlled power. The calmer mind controls the room. This lesson becomes critical in relationships. Many relationships fail not because of major problems, but because small conflicts are handled emotionally instead of intelligently. One misunderstanding becomes emotional warfare. One disagreement becomes personal attacks. One stressful moment becomes emotional destruction. Why? Because neither person paused long enough to control themselves first. Conflict does not destroy relationships automatically. Emotional impulsiveness during conflict destroys relationships. That is the truth. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do during conflict is remain silent temporarily, not passive, aggressive silence. Disciplined silence. There is a difference. Disciplined silence gives emotions time to settle. It prevents impulsive damage. It creates space for clarity. That is maturity. Weak minds demand immediate emotional release. Strong minds prioritize long-term outcomes. That difference changes everything. You must also learn to separate criticism from emotional attack. Emotionally, immature people interpret every disagreement as personal rejection. Their ego becomes fragile instantly, but emotionally disciplined people ask, is there truth inside this criticism? Can I learn from this calmly? That mindset creates growth. Defensiveness blocks growth. Calm reflection creates wisdom. That is why emotionally stable people improve faster in life. They do not collapse emotionally every time someone challenges them. They evaluate calmly. They adjust intelligently. They move forward without emotional chaos consuming them. That is strength. Conflict also reveals emotional priorities. Ask yourself honestly, do you want peace or do you want emotional victory? Because many people secretly choose emotional victory repeatedly. They would rather win the argument emotionally than protect the relationship itself. That is ego, and ego destroys peace. Sometimes peace requires restraint. Sometimes peace requires humility. Sometimes peace requires letting go of the need to be right constantly. That is emotional maturity. You have a choice. You can continue reacting emotionally during conflict and creating unnecessary damage, or you can become disciplined enough to stay calm, think clearly, and protect your peace even during difficult conversations. That choice changes your future. Remember this clearly. Conflict is unavoidable. Emotional chaos is optional. The calmer your mind becomes, the more clearly you think during pressure. And the more clearly you think, the harder it becomes for conflict to control you emotionally. That does not mean you tolerate disrespect endlessly. That does not mean you become passive. It means you respond with discipline instead of emotional impulsiveness. That is power. Control your breathing. Control your tone. Control your pace. Control your reactions. Because self-control during conflict separates mentally strong people from emotionally reactive people instantly. Most people spend their lives emotionally controlled by external situations. But once you learn to remain calm during conflict, you stop becoming emotionally available to chaos. And that changes everything. Because eventually, emotional mastery reaches a deeper level. A level where external chaos no longer controls your internal world at all. That is the final transformation. Chapter 10. Become mentally untouchable. Most people are emotionally controlled by the world around them. Their mood depends on circumstances. Their peace depends on other people. Their confidence depends on validation. Their focus depends on comfort. So when life becomes difficult, they collapse internally. But mentally untouchable people live differently. Their strength comes from within. That is the final lesson. Inner peace is real power. Remember that phrase, inner peace is real power. The goal was never to control the world around you. The goal was always to control yourself within the world. That is emotional mastery. Most people spend years chasing external control, more money, more approval, more certainty, more recognition. They believe external success will finally create internal peace. But external success without internal discipline still creates emotional instability. You can have success and still feel anxious. You can have status and still feel emotionally weak. You can have attention and still feel empty internally. Because peace is not external. Peace is trained internally. That is the key. You have a choice. You can continue allowing outside conditions to determine your emotional state. Or you can build a mind so disciplined that external chaos no longer controls you. That decision changes your entire life. Mentally untouchable people are not emotionless. That is important to understand. They still feel disappointment. They still feel pain. They still experience stress, fear, anger, and uncertainty. But they no longer surrender control to those emotions automatically. That is the difference. Weak minds become consumed by emotion. Strong minds observe emotion without becoming controlled by it. That is emotional freedom. Your first emotion is instinct. Your second response is your power. Never forget that. Think about how much suffering comes from emotional dependency. People depend on praise to feel valuable. They depend on attention to feel important. They depend on relationships to feel complete. They depend on perfect outcomes to feel secure. And because of that dependency, they live emotionally vulnerable constantly. The world controls them. One rejection destroys them. One criticism weakens them. One setback breaks their momentum. That is emotional fragility. Mentally untouchable people move differently. They build internal stability first. Their confidence comes from discipline. Their peace comes from self-control. Their focus comes from purpose. Their identity comes from within. That creates emotional independence. And emotional independence creates freedom. Inner peace is real power. Most people misunderstand power completely. They think power means controlling others, controlling situations, dominating conversations. But real power is self-mastery. The ability to remain calm when others panic. The ability to remain disciplined when others become emotional. The ability to stay focused while chaos surrounds you. That is rare. And rare qualities become valuable. The mentally untouchable person understands something most people never learn. External chaos becomes less dangerous when internal chaos disappears. That is why emotional discipline changes every part of your life. Now criticism affects you less. Now toxic people affect you less. Now pressure affects you less. Now setbacks affect you less. Because your emotional foundation became stronger, not perfect strong. That is the goal. You do not need to become emotionless. You need to become emotionally disciplined. There is a difference. Emotionless people disconnect from life. Disciplined people control themselves within life. That is maturity. Many people spend their lives chasing temporary emotional highs because they never built lasting internal peace. They chase stimulation constantly, entertainment, validation, attention, drama, approval. Why? Because silence feels uncomfortable when your mind lacks discipline. But mentally untouchable people no longer need constant distraction to escape themselves. They are comfortable internally. That changes everything. Calmness becomes natural. Patience becomes natural. Stillness becomes natural. Not because life became easier, because the mind became stronger. That is the transformation. Most people are controlled by external circumstances because they never developed internal standards. Their emotions change constantly depending on what happens around them. Good day, they feel strong. Bad day, that is emotional instability. But disciplined people remain grounded regardless of temporary conditions. They understand life moves in cycles. Pain comes, pain leaves. Success comes, success leaves. Praise comes, praise leaves. Nothing external remains permanent. That is why attaching your emotional state to temporary conditions creates suffering. Control yourself, not the world. That lesson becomes even more powerful now. Because mentally untouchable people stop chasing emotional certainty from unstable things. They stop needing everyone to understand them. They stop needing constant validation. They stop needing life to feel perfect before feeling at peace internally. That freedom changes the way they move through life. Calm people think more clearly. Clear people make better decisions. Better decisions create better lives. That is how emotional mastery compounds over time. One calm decision at a time. One disciplined response at a time. One moment of restraint at a time. That is how you become mentally untouchable. Most people are fighting external battles constantly while ignoring the internal battle destroying them quietly. The battle against emotional impulsiveness. The battle against insecurity. The battle against fear. The battle against ego. But once you learn to master yourself internally, external situations lose much of their power over you. That is freedom, not freedom from pain. Freedom from emotional slavery, because pain is unavoidable. But emotional self-destruction is often optional. You have a choice. You can continue living emotionally reactive, emotionally dependent, and emotionally controlled by outside conditions. Or you can become disciplined enough to remain calm, focused, and grounded regardless of what happens around you. That choice determines your future. And understand this, clearly mental toughness is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built daily, every time you stay calm instead of reacting emotionally. Every time you protect your peace instead of chasing drama. Every time you choose discipline over impulsiveness. Every time you detach from what you cannot control, you strengthen yourself, slowly, quietly, powerfully. That is why calm people become dangerous over time, because while emotional people waste years trapped in chaos, disciplined people quietly build internal power. And internal power changes everything. Your relationships improve because you stop reacting impulsively. Your focus improves because distractions lose emotional control over you. Your confidence improves because discipline builds self-trust. Your peace improves because your mind finally becomes stable internally. That is the reward. Inner peace is real power, not temporary comfort, not emotional excitement, not outside approval. Peace, the kind created through self-control, the kind created through discipline, the kind created through emotional mastery. That is what makes someone mentally untouchable. And now you understand the truth. Most people never fully learn. The strongest person is not the loudest person, not the most aggressive person, not the person controlling everyone else. The strongest person is the one who can control themselves, even under pressure, even during conflict, even during uncertainty. That is real strength. And from this moment forward, every difficult situation becomes training. Every stressful moment becomes practice. Every emotional trigger becomes an opportunity. Every challenge becomes another chance to strengthen your mind. You are no longer powerless against your emotions. Now you are aware. Now you are in control. And once a person learns to control themselves internally, the outside world loses its ability to shake them completely. By now, you understand something most people will never learn. Calmness is not weakness. Calmness is control. Emotional people react. Disciplined people respond. Weak minds panic under pressure. Strong minds slow down, think clearly, and stay focused when life becomes difficult. You cannot control toxic people. You cannot control every situation that enters your life. But you can control yourself. And the moment you master yourself, your entire life changes. Every chapter in this audiobook carried the same message. Stop reacting. Stop seeking validation. Stop surrendering your peace to temporary emotions. Train your mind daily. Protect your focus daily. Build emotional discipline daily, because the world belongs to people who stay calm when everyone else loses control. Now the challenge is simple. For the next 7 days, practice emotional control in every situation. Pause before reacting. Stay silent when others expect anger. Stay focused when others become emotional. Train yourself to remain calm no matter what happens. That is how you become mentally untouchable.